Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 210. Dang, man. 2 weeks to slow the spread 4 years ago. Remember that. All right. So we're going to talk about stuff that requires courage. But before we go into imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff, I want to pause and acknowledge that this is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. That was courage. Those men that stormed the beaches of Normandy and the women that were supporting and also in the war effort, the world would be looking a lot different had those people not done that. And one of my favorite World War II vets is still alive today. Mace Coleman, 96 years old, went into the war at age 15 and fought in Okinawa, and he brought National Gypsum to Charlotte, North Carolina as this chairman and CEO. So we are super thrilled. Today we got Tana Greene and Tana. I mean, Tana is one of my favorite CEOs in the entire world on the planet, and you guys will understand why. And I think it's very important that you understand this. So when I was coaching full time with one of my favorite people on the planet as well, Robert Fish, he goes, "Listen, if you ever get to meet Tana Greene, make sure you do." Well, that he was a former competitor when he and his wife had their company. That says a lot when your competition is saying you need to meet one of my competitors. So I just want you to put that into context. And I did get to meet Tana, and I did get to hear her story. And I encourage you highly to get this book called Creating a World of Difference that Tana wrote and she designed. Like this. It's beautiful. As a former designer, I'm visually smitten anyway, by well-designed stuff. Well, this does that, but oh boy, this really gets into the meat of the matter where it takes tremendous courage in exposing stuff that she did, but it set her free and it set a lot of other people free. But that's one of the weapons in imposter syndrome. So we want this to be a dialogue with y'all. One other stat before we go into imposters in the C-suite. Thank you, Randall. You're always on here. I appreciate your engagement and your level of engagement and just how well read you are and how up you are on current events and what's going on. So there was a jobs cuts announcement that came out, and basically bottom line was, so it was in trading economics. Hiring announcements are at 4326, their lowest levels in a decade. And so, Tana, I'm going to also want to talk with you a little bit about that because you see it. You got your finger on the pulse. And so I do want you to talk about what you're seeing in the market and give the listeners and the viewers a shot at like understanding what my work choice is, the sectors that you work in, etc. So I'm going to just say, all right, guys, you're in for a real treat. Meet Tana Greene, one of my favorite people. Tana, give us an overview of what your current my work choice is, what you're seeing in the marketplace, and then let's go into your story.
Thank you, Gary. And as well, I was told I had to meet you, and it was a blessing that I did because we've coached each other through this imposter syndrome many days. It's not something that you cure and it's gone forever. So it's a constant journey to fight that imposter syndrome. So I would say my work choice is a platform. It's a technology platform that came out of being in the staffing industry for 36 years now. We just celebrated 36 years of being in business. And it was 5 years ago, it was a light industrial staffing company for manufacturing and distribution. And what we were seeing in the workplaces was 400% turnover a year with these hourly workers from a staffing standpoint. So I would have a plant that needed 1,000 workers, and I was replacing those 1,000 workers every quarter. I mean, so the churn of that was just, it was painful for us. It was painful for the client. And so we started saying, why is this happening? And then we started hearing from the client that they were having 30% absenteeism a day. These are manufacturing floors like GE and Stanley Black and Decker and DeWalt. And we're going, what is going on? So we started studying the workforce, and we really started realizing that what was happening was is people could not live their lives and work a constant 5 day a week, 40 hours without a day off, 3 strikes, you're out. You couldn't live your life. When these shifts were created by Ford in 1922, it was only men in the workplace. They had a wife at home to do everything. Now everything is shared. You have a life, you have parents you take care of. So people need flexibility. White collar workers have had that forever. I mean, we can go to the dentist when we need to go to the dentist. Heck, I go in the middle of the day and spend 2 hours getting my hair done. I mean, you can't do that when you're an hourly worker. So we studied it and we really tested it out, and we said, what if we gave them empowerment? What if we empowered the working world with the ability to drop shifts, pick up shifts? And the client's biggest worry was, well, I have production I have to meet. I have to have enough people on the floor. So we have to train enough people that, and AI helps with this. AI helps us figure out if I need 400 people every day, I probably have to have 600 trained, production ready. Basically, what we used to say, sitting on a bench. Well, that sitting on a bench resides on a phone now with an app. So now somebody can take a job and say, hey, I can set a set schedule of 40 hours a week, third shift, but I need to drop Wednesday night, and then I might be able to pick something up on Saturday to keep me whole. But how do you do that without the technology? So we built the technology for our workers, our W-2, which we have over 10,000 across the country in 42 states, and they get to choose when they want to work. Well, we are now trending at 88% show rate on every shift every day. The average show rate for a staffing company is 50 to 60%. And it's because we give them choice. So now the client comes to me and says, hey, I want to put my people on this too. I want to help. I want to figure out how to introduce flexibility to my workforce. So now their people are on it. They're allowed to drop shifts. As long as they give a 12-hour notice, 99.9% of the time, somebody's going to pick up that shift because we have the right mix of people. We have part-time people, we have full-time people. And so now we have the SaaS product that lets the client put their people on it. Now it's just this big, happy family that shares the job. And that's what we've created with My Work Choice. And it's going gangbusters, and it is creating such a difference in the lives of everybody we're serving. I mean, empowering the working world is my purpose, and I am fulfilling it now. So very excited to share that. We are seeing in the industry, manufacturing is still not picking up. When you look at the job numbers last month, 175,000 new jobs. I was fortunate enough to be in Colorado with an economist who's, I asked the question, okay, so out of those 175,000 jobs, what jobs are they? Because we're not seeing them being created in the supply chain. 70% are government jobs and the other are service sector. So we're
Wow.
still not seeing a change in job growth where we need it. I'm really looking for that to change. I'm not seeing it yet. We're still having some supply chain issues, but it has improved greatly in the last year. So that part, but people are still sitting on inventory. They're not going to build. They're not going to produce. And our unemployment rate is low. And people don't want to take that full-time job that they know they're going to be fired after
Yeah.
3 absences.
Right.
I mean, so that we've got to start thinking a little bit differently in this world.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you were able to give kind of that overview. First of all, if you didn't figure it out, people, uh, Tana is a pioneer. Like she's a visionary. She works her butt off, but she has balance too. So, which so I really appreciate that. And her husband Mike, they have done a great job, and she's built a very good management team around herself. And so, and we'll probably get into some of that too, because I do want to go back to your story. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you for keeping your finger on the pulse. Thank you for employing so many people. Thank you for being such a ripple maker, not only in Charlotte, North Carolina, but throughout all the states where my work choice impacts and wherever you get to tell your message, because it has made a difference. I've heard it so many times, Tana, from people you don't even know. I mentioned Tana Greene, they're like, oh my gosh, she is just so amazing. So I really appreciate that. And the people that we're serving, the people that are on this call today and that will be watching it after we post it later on our YouTube channel, you guys are the ripple makers out there too. You're creating jobs. You're the ones that have taken the risks, put it all on the line because you had a dream, you had a vision, you had a purpose, and you're trying to do it right. Those are the people that we continue to attract to BGW, but also to this webinar that we've been doing for 210 weeks now. Um, so I do want to go back to your story, because this, again, people, anybody that has come on late or just recently, Tana has over 10,000 employees, and she has also sold one company. She is a pioneer. I mean, breaking an 8-hour shift into 2 4-hour flexible, Uberifying the workforce. Nobody else has done. You're a pioneer, which is really cool. But
It's
you
also
didn't stop.
really hard and really expensive.
Yeah, yeah. You got the battle wounds to prove it.
Right.
uh, and when I first met you, you've also been on the Anything But Typical podcast. By the way, she was one of our first guests, and it was before we went into lockdown, so we were still doing her live. And really good episode. So if you guys are podcast listeners, go to the Anything But Typical podcast, and I think she was episode number 3 or 4, something like that. Um, but listen to that. But I want to go back, Tana, to kind of your journey. And when I met you, you had said at one point, actually, I think we were kind of coaching each other at one point. And you said, Gary, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, I just laughed. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? You're one of the best CEOs I know, and that's no joke. Why would you say that? And then you can tell the rest of the story. But at once you gave that answer,
Yeah.
that's when I knew I had to write this stinking book on
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, because pretty much every CEO that I've either gotten a coach or that I've walked alongside or I've worked for that has been willing to drop their guard has suffered from the same thing. And the problem is when you're a CEO or you're a co-founder, you're in the top seat. It's the loneliest seat in the company. Nobody realizes that unless you've done it. And so let's go back to what you said and then back to your journey.
Um, so thinking back on it, it's you don't realize you're even in the imposter syndrome when you're in it, because it's usually you're hiding something because you don't want people to
Mm,
think differently of you. So you're always trying to keep an image up, which is a very heavy burden. It's a very heavy
mm,
burden to carry to keep this. I got to have I'm a CEO of this company and I'm on the chambers board and I'm serving on this and that. And I have this look and this presentation I have to have, and a background. I have to have this background that people think.
Yes.
And my background wasn't very easy or pretty. I'll briefly tell that one. But I was raised in Chesapeake, Virginia, and I started high school in 1973. I'm dating myself now. But I have been in business 36 years, so I got to be a certain age, right? So I'm starting high school and I'm on the principals committee. I'm the chaplain of my school. Believe it or not, we had those elected positions, and chaplain was one of them. And I
Yeah.
was an honor roll student. And what does every girl want when they start high school is the boyfriend. And I got Mr. Right, literally. His last name was Wright. And
Mm,
he chose me, Mr. Popular. And by the time I hit my summer between my ninth and 10th year, I was pregnant.
mm,
So I went to my parents and I said to my mom, I said, you won't love me anymore. And she said, what? And I said, I think I'm pregnant. And she said, I think you are too. And I said, what? And she says, well, you've gotten sick every morning for the last 2 weeks. She said, kind of a telltale sign. And she grabs me, she hugs me, and she says, I am so excited. I thought I was going to be too old to be a grandmother because she was older when she had me. She was told she
mm,
couldn't have children. They adopted, and then I came along later in life. So here's this woman giving me unconditional love. I'm sure
mm,
now I wish I could talk to her because she's been gone for a while, but I'm sure that's not what she was thinking at the time when she gave me that unconditional love. But they said, what do you want to do? We want to get married. 2 weeks later, I'm walking down the aisle wearing a white dress. And you can't
wow.
even use the word pregnant because in front of my grandmother, because that was just taboo in 1974.
Yeah.
So off we went. I quit school because you can't go to school pregnant in 1974. And we're supposed to live this happy, wonderful life. And 2 years into it, I realize I'm in a domestic violence relationship, a physical one. And I keep thinking I can fix it. Well, I finally get out of that relationship. And I remember my mom set me up with a counselor at the YWCA. There was nothing called domestic violence in 1974, there was no shelters. And I remember this counselor saying to me, you need to make a decision. You've either got to decide to be a victim or a survivor. You have one or the other choices. There's no in between.
Mm,
And I'll never forget, he said, go home and write down goals on a piece of paper. I'm 17 years old with a baby with a ninth grade education. I went home and I wrote 4 goals on a piece of paper. I said, I'm going to finish school and I want a cap and gown. I don't want a GED. I want to own my own home by the time I'm 25. I want to own my own business by the time I'm 30. And I want to marry a knight in shining armor somewhere in there. So pretty lofty goals. That was my hedgehog back then. So finished school 3 years into, graduated cap and gown, bought my first house at 22, married my husband Mike that you mentioned. We just celebrated 39 years at 26 years old and opened the doors of this business at 29. And that really became my journey. But I couldn't tell anybody that journey because
mm,
I was embarrassed that I
mm.
was married so young, that I didn't have a college degree, and that here I am. I'm supposed to be this CEO. What right do I have to be in this role? And I carried that burden till I was almost 50 years old. And one day, out of the blue, a friend of mine's daughter, who was going to canon school and was a senior, said, we're studying healthy relationships. Would you come talk to my class? And I said, yes. And then I thought, oh, what have you done? You're going to expose it all. You're going to tell everybody. And then I thought, I don't know anything about this subject except for what I went through. So I dialed the hotline. I said, can somebody please go with me? And so this woman went with me. Little did I know she was the CEO of Safe Alliance at that time.
Wow.
I ended up serving on the board for 12 years. We built a shelter, which we raised $10 million in '08. Go figure, the worst possible time. But we
Wow.
were only a year behind our goal. And we opened that shelter, and I became the spokesperson. And I became the one on the Channel 9 news when they needed to talk about the fact that we were breaking ground or what somebody domestic violence looks like, sounds like, acts like. What is it that we're dealing with here? And to this day, I'm now involved with the Courage Museum in San Francisco, which I will be one of 15 stories that they've captured that will travel the country in 2026. So it's taking that story and being authentic that released this. I can't even explain it. Gary, you've been there. It's like the minute you become authentic with yourself and your own story, everything blossoms for you. Everything.
Yeah.
My work, my employees. Um, I do a one-on-one call with my employees and they say, a couple of them said, I've never spoken to a CEO before. And I said, well, what do you think? Am I any different than your friends or and they're like, no. So it's really fun once you get to that point, but I'm not saying that I solved it all in that moment. There are moments when we're growing this business that I think, what have I done? I don't have the skills or the ability to do this. And you have to go deep inside and go, if not me, who? Get
Yes.
it together and move forward. So, and I paint, I oil paint. That's one of my paintings behind me. That's what I do as a hobby. And every time I look at a blank canvas, let me tell you, it's the imposter syndrome. It's like, who do you think you are? You cannot do this. You don't have any
Mm,
formal training. So it shows up in all aspects of our lives. And it's just recognizing it. I think you naming it in your book, Gary, was the best thing on the planet to be able to say, hey, this exists and this is what you do with it and this is how you solve it. And every time it rears its ugly head, these are the steps you take to get there. And
yeah.
thank you for that. We all need that in our lives, and that will live on long beyond you. And thank you for that, adding that to our lives, because it is something we all deal with, not just CEOs, but everybody.
Yeah. No, that's true. Here's what I think is so funny. I never even heard this term imposter syndrome until probably 4 or 5 years ago. But it was that conversation with you when you said, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, why would you say that? And you said, I only have a 2 year secretarial degree. And here's what's funny, people. Tana did not even have a full-time CFO until I was brought in to help her. And she brought in a CFO and she had 10,000 employees. Like, let's do it at that point. Like, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, you are way, way smarter than you think you are. But here's the thing, a lot of times we compare what we think everybody else knows. So
Yes.
the best visual description I've ever seen or heard of imposter syndrome is picture a 1 inch circle. And in that 1 inch circle, it says what I know. That's what we all think we know, right? And maybe it's actually a lot smaller if you really look at what we really know in the grand scheme of the universe and everything else. But this 1 inch circle is surrounded by a 5 foot circle. And this 5 foot circle, it says what I think everyone else knows. Hmm. Why is that? I don't even know that I am sure about that, but I do know this. We compare everybody else's what we think they know, show reels and Instagram and social media has only exacerbated it.
Yeah.
Well, so we have this picture of what a CEO, we have this picture of what an entrepreneur is, we have a picture of what a leader is, and we think, well, I'm not that because we know our behind the scenes reels. We know all of our less than stuff and the stuff that Tana kept hidden till she was in her 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, man, you've blossomed since you've done this because
Yes.
think about that weight that you were carrying around. And for me, it was like, I'm a college dropout. I wasn't because I wanted to be. And every job I've had was master's preferred, bachelor's required. And I've been drug into businesses that I had no business whatsoever. I had no experience in doing. And so when we would see success, you'd go, man, I was lucky. I just happened to have the right people around me, right? Tan, I mean, these are
Yeah.
these thoughts that just plague us.
Yes.
But one of the best things that you can ever do is just admit it. And so Tana's book and what she said, that's weapon number three, which is shine a light on it. And that's why I said, it seems so masochistic, but that's exactly why anytime we talk about imposter syndrome, I'm wearing this shirt thanks to One Word Brands. I bought the remaining ones. They went out of business and then somebody else bought them because the founder is like, it's just too hard. And he'd done it for, I don't know, 5 years or so. And it's like, but then they passed the torch. Nonetheless, it takes tremendous courage to put a spotlight on that. It's simple, but it ain't easy. But this whole feeling like it, but here's what will happen when you do it. It just it's like this relief valve. Boom, all that pressure is gone. And anybody that rejects you because of that, they weren't worth being in your orbit anyway.
Fact.
Right?
Yes, that's a fact. Yes.
I mean, like if they had to have whatever picture you were trying to paint of yourself to be around you, and that wasn't really who you are, you don't want them in your
Yeah.
orbit anyway.
Right.
It's just how it is. I didn't know that you'd painted that too. That
Yeah.
is beautiful. Irises are just gorgeous.
Thank you. That's actually a path, and all the people that have passed along the way in my life is the meaning behind it. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. It was one of those where I'm looking at this blank canvas going, I have no idea what I'm going to paint, but it had to be something from my heart. It had to be something that had meaning. So, and that's actually they shipped it out to California when we filmed for the Courage Museum, which I think it's funny that you're wearing the Courage shirt.
Oh, it's called the
Um,
Courage Museum.
yes,
I
it's
didn't
called
know
the
that.
Courage Museum, which is
Wow.
even crazier. I know. It just didn't even hit me until you said that. But they shipped all this out and they set up my office as it is here when they did the filming. So it was just an amazing experience. But yeah, it's called the Courage Museum. Look it up. It's amazing.
Oh, I'm going to definitely look that up because I was disappointed because we had our first CEO convergence of all the guests that have been on the Anything But Typical podcast in the now 4.5 years. But this was last fall. And you're like, oh man, Gary, I'd love to be there, but I'm going to be at this thing in San Francisco.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I was doing. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Wow, how cool.
Yeah.
So
So,
here's something that's interesting because you said this like, hey, it doesn't mean like just because you've had victory over it doesn't mean that it's like a one and done and boom,
right.
right? Because
Right.
you did, you know, weapon number three, shine a light on it, but then you still said, I don't know what I'm doing. Why?
Right.
And it
Because
comes
it kept
back into that
changing.
comparison.
No, the landscaping kept changing. And again, and it's a
Yes.
pioneering thing. And it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Hey, talk about now, don't know what I'm doing. So I have a granddaughter that's starting high school this fall. And then I have a daughter that's pregnant due in September. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to be this grandmother thing. I mean, it's been 14 years. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
and I'm a little nervous about it, which is crazy. It's like, talk about that imposter syndrome coming in. It's like, you don't know what you're doing. It's been too long and you're a little older. I don't know if you can handle this. So but it keeps creeping up in every aspect of your life. And you have to just trust, first of all, trust in yourself
Yeah.
and trust in the universe or whatever you believe in that you are where you're supposed to be. And when
Mm.
you get that, you go, okay, I'm here because I'm supposed to be here. And I have what it takes, or I wouldn't be here and doing what I'm doing. And I think that self talk to myself a lot of times is like, wait a minute, why do you doubt this? You've got
Mm.
this, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't supposed to be here. Too many times I've tried to change my path in life. I don't know,
Mm.
Gary, you've done this, and I'm sure a lot of you all have done this, but it's like, oh no, I'm supposed to be doing this. And you set all this stuff up and it gets harder and harder and harder. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong path. I need
Mm.
to back up and get on the path where it feels right in my gut. My dad always said to me, my dad was my mentor. And he said, I went to buy my first house at 22 and I went to him and I said, interest rates were 13%, by the way.
Yeah.
So 7% ain't so bad. Anyway, So he says to me, I said, what, am I doing the right thing? And he goes, how does it feel in your gut? I said, feels good. He
Ah,
goes, then you're doing the right thing. And I learned to pay attention to that. And a lot of
mm,
times in business, we'll be driving in a certain direction because we think that's where we're supposed to be going. I gave a talk out in Colorado a couple of weeks ago to a women's group, women that do over 10 million in businesses, and I had a whole room full. And it was growth. And I said, first of all, growing isn't pretty and it isn't safe and it isn't all that's cracked up to be. Sometimes being where you are is where you're supposed to be. And maybe you're just earning a lifestyle in your business, and that's okay. Growth is not for everybody. Growth is not an easy thing to accept, and talk about imposter syndrome when you're trying to grow. It's
yeah.
very difficult, but it's that kind of thing where you got to say, is this where I'm supposed to be? And does it feel right to me? And if it does, then you're doing the right thing. And sometimes I think we just try to put it on paper, or we try to drive it with some strategy. And the strategy's got to be in your heart and in your gut first.
You that's a really important thing, Tana, because how many times do we do things because we think, well, that's the way it is. That's
Yes.
normal.
Yes.
Normal is a setting on the dryer, folks. I mean, like that's it.
Yeah.
But paying attention to your gut and paying attention and understanding purpose.
Yes.
The Simon Sinek, like, man, he just unlocked a lot of people because he made it clear and understandable about finding your why, right?
Yes.
And you've talked about that. You're a very purpose-driven CEO. You're
Mhm.
very purpose-driven about your core values, your purpose, et cetera. How did you get synthesis around that?
Um, you there's a lot of coaches along the way, a lot of consultants brought into the business to help us grow or help us figure things out. And all of them said you have to have mission, vision, values. Mission, vision, values. I must have heard that a million times. And you'd write them on a piece of paper, and you'd post them on your website, you'd post them on the walls. But one coach finally said to me, what's important to you? It's your values. You
Yeah,
have to decide, and they have to be something that's real to you. Well, it probably took me 6 months to a year to really identify the top four values. And the mission to me is your purpose. I
yeah,
don't know. A lot of times you hear this, you got to have this written mission statement. Well, our purpose is to empower the working world. I think what Apple's was to put a computer on everybody's desk, and they thought they were crazy back then. And it's like, you got to have a goal that meets what's important to you. I started this job 36 years ago, this company, to help people get a job. That was what
yeah,
was important to me. I was a career counselor at a college. My favorite part was when people got the job, and it was at a business school. And so for me, it was like, I'm going to help people get a job. And then when this discovery came, and trust me, there were many times along the 36 years I thought, oh, it's time for me to get out and go do my calling.
yeah.
I had this thing in my head that I had to go do a calling. And another coach said, why can't your calling be right where you are? And I said, well, you can't make money and be in a calling. That was
Mm.
a message that I had gotten somewhere along the way. I'm sure it was the
Wow.
religious background that I had, that said money's evil and you can't be doing a calling and making money. And so once I came to terms with that and realized that this is where I'm supposed to be, now the real purpose of empowering the working world with flexibility in an hourly workforce that's never had it became very clear about 5 years ago. Boy, talk about blossoming. When that hit, it was like, wow, that's it. So I encourage you to know that your purpose changes over time. Your purpose is not always cut and dry. And as you grow, it grows. And who knows what it'll be for me 10 years from now. I just know that's where it is now. So knowing your purpose and then having everybody follow a purpose. I mean, you have to. What did they say? If you know what you do and how it makes a difference, you're a happier employee. And I believe that if people know how their gifts connect to what you're trying to accomplish in your purpose, they connect all those dots, they get entwined in the values of the company, and you have a happier workforce. I just hope that everybody that works for me somewhere along the way, whether they stay with me or not, benefits from the time they were here. And that's the way I look at every employee. Every employee is not meant to stay with you forever.
Yeah.
And if you want to grow, that's a hard lesson too. No man's land trying to get beyond that $50 million point is you better look at your team because the people that got you here is probably not the team that's going to get you there.
Yeah.
And that's a harsh thing as a leader to do is change out the players that you need to do to get to the next level. And but it's all about your purpose. And
Yeah.
if you're driving your purpose, you will do whatever it takes to bring that purpose to the world.
Just think about that. If you're listening and paying attention, there's a reason that she is one of my favorite CEOs because purpose drives everything.
Yes.
And vulnerability is essential in the leader in order to have a healthy workforce because guess what? They all have vulnerability, but they need to be able to have permission to express it.
Yes.
So I'm gonna take us back to 19 in the early 1970s when part of your journey that you've talked about began because I think this is really interesting. So this term imposter syndrome was first coined by two female psychologists in the early 1970s because they observed this phenomenon among high achieving female clients that they had. And they were these thoughts of, I'm not good enough. I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not that good. I've got to hide this or that because they're going to reject me if I expose these behind the scenes real, less than beautiful outtakes. Those were the thoughts plaguing these clients of these two female psychologists. Well, guess what? They say now 70% of the population, not just females, I know I dealt with it since I was probably 8 years old. Didn't know there was such a thing called imposter syndrome. I didn't even think of of myself as an imposter. I just felt less than.
Mhm.
I felt like I didn't fit. I felt like I looked at everybody else and they were normal and I wasn't normal because, when we'd walk down the little town that I grew up in Kansas, my dad's dragging a leg because he lost his leg to polio at age 17. I just wanted to be normal. I didn't want the stairs. Well, guess what? None of us are normal. We're all anything but typical. Anyone, everyone has a unique thumbprint by design. By design. Tana, you don't know this, but so I told this story because I had enough time yesterday. But before I met my wife, and we got married when she was 19 and I was 21, so it's 41 years this summer. But I had dated three young ladies for very kind of short periods of time, late in high school and then early in college. All three of them had twins. All Two of them were identical twins, different families, obviously, and you couldn't really tell them apart. I mean, they could have really screwed around with me, but here's what I found was so fascinating. The last one was a fraternal. She had a twin brother. All wonderful people, but they all had unique thumbprints. Even the identical twins, like they didn't have the same, which that says a lot to me. That says a lot to me. And they were unique. They did have different tastes when you really got to know them. They weren't clones of each other. So I just think that's really important. And it's part of the freedom that comes, I think, with understanding your uniqueness. Celebrate everybody else's uniqueness. Quit trying to
Yes.
be like them. You
Right.
can admire people and want to have certain aspects that you would like to emulate, but don't try to be them because you're
Mhm.
not. Be you. So, Hannah, one of the other things that you have done exceptionally well, you alluded to it because you said you've had a lot of coaches along the way. You've had mentors, you've had other people, but I also know that you are part of the women's professional organization, you're a member of other groups, which is actually weapon number 7. And that one actually will cost you. All the other 6 weapons don't cost you a dime. They will cost you heartache sometimes and courage and to muster up
Yes.
courage. But the 7th weapon is find somebody outside the jar to help you read the label because it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. I want your perspective on how you got involved, why you've gotten involved, and why you've stayed involved in other groups, peer-to-peer groups, one-on-one coaches, working with you, management teams, etc. Talk about what you've learned from those experiences and what drove you to that.
Well, I think part of it is I'm a constant learner. Um, and I always want to find out, is there a better way? I've done the Strength Finder. I highly recommend that for everybody to do. I did it in '09. I still go back and look at my Strength Finder. My employee base all takes it, and we have discussions about it because I think once you understand your top 5 strengths, you can then start to hone in on, because one of my strengths is, of course, leadership and connectivity is number 1, which is getting people to follow you. But growing up, my mom said, "You're bossy. You need to tone
Oh
it
man.
down." So I would go into board meetings and not open my mouth because I didn't want to be seen as this person that couldn't control their feelings or their whatever it was that my
Mm,
mother squashed down in me. So I think we have gifts within us that we don't use because somewhere along the way, a teacher, a
mm.
parent, a spouse, somebody, a sibling said, "Yeah, you can't do that." I still don't sing happy birthday out loud because my brother said I couldn't sing. Okay.
Wow.
So I probably should take a lesson to know that I probably can, but
Yeah.
I really,
Yeah.
it's not on my top priority list. But it is amazing. I'm constantly wanting to know how I do it better. I am a maximizer, and I'm a activator. At home, that's called nagging. So we finally called it activating and got it out of the way. And so I even have a gentleman that takes care of my house. He's been part of our family for 10 years. He takes care of everything. And he'll come in and he'll go, "Oh, she's activating again." It worked. It's a positive, right? Get it done, get it done, get it done. Of course, some of my team, my futurist part of me, some of my team will say, "Can we just finish this before we go on to that?" So it's
Yeah.
really knowing yourself. And I think constant learning. Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, was our speaker at our event out in Colorado, which is this women presidents organization that I've been a member for 25 years. And one thing he said was he has studied how many CEOs. I mean, that's all he's done for 30 years is study CEOs. And he said the number one trait they have is they are humble. Well, Gary, I don't know about you, but I think humble comes with the imposter syndrome because I
Yeah.
think if you're not doubting some of that, you're not as good. So when I heard him say that
Mm.
a couple of weeks ago, I thought of you immediately and I thought, there it is. I mean, we we as a CEO, if we think we have it all, I think those are the ones that fail because they don't question things. They don't look back and say, "Well, I don't know if I know that. Let me go see if I can figure it out." So I really put 2 and 2 together for the first time a couple weeks ago, hearing him speak that, you know, humble does come with that because you question it.
Mm.
And it's a gift. We think of it
Man,
as a
that is
curse, but it's a
great.
gift.
It is, and that is a great observation. I never heard that from Jim Collins, so I learned something new from you today. And I'm a huge Jim Collins fan. But what's funny is humility is the number one thing I look for in people.
Yes.
And I would hope that I emulate it too. But it's what's attractive because you can actually get close to somebody when there's vulnerability.
Yes.
When all you have is this facade of like everything's fantastic and like there we have moments where that is the case. That's wonderful. We celebrate that. But when your entire career chronology is just like one pinnacle to the next pinnacle, I'm like, man, there's a gap that they're not talking about,
That's right.
right?
That's
There's
right.
something there. And so to hear that from Collins is really amazing. And it gives everybody else permission
Yeah.
to be that too.
Yeah.
Um, that is one thing that we have seen as a massive constant across the board on every guest that we've had on the Anything But Typical podcast. Have this voracious need to learn.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that, so the opposite of the imposter syndrome is what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but the Dunning-Kruger effect is where you have people that are basically unteachable and they estimate their abilities far greater than what they are. So somebody
Mm.
goes, "Hey, yeah, I can just go out and run a marathon. I don't have to train. I can do that." Well, I know of one person that had renal failure because of it and about killed him because they hadn't trained.
Mm.
They started bleeding internally
Mm.
and their kidneys shut down because they overestimated it. It was definitely Dunning-Kruger effect.
Mm.
And you're not teachable then,
Right.
so that one will bite you. So,
Right.
um, talk to us a little bit more about um, how do you combat this feeling of being alone at times when you are running a company and you're supposed to have all the answers? How do you deal with that, Tana?
I think I share that with my executive team as much as you can share those things, but I think I've surrounded myself with people that have the same empathy level of knowing what leadership is, knowing what failure feels like, knowing what challenge feels like. And I think it took me a long time to get the right people on the bus that are like that. But there's a point to where you're still alone. And someone once said to
Yeah.
me, at this level, if you really need that camaraderie, go get a dog.
Uh,
And I never forgot that. And there are certain things that you just, I mean, you're at this place. You have to
yeah.
do it alone. And being part of the Women Presidents Organization, I have a small group of 20. There's 20 of us in one group. We meet 3 times a year all around the world, actually. And these women are my board of advisors. And I think in life, you
Mm,
need a board of advisors. So it's not a formal board of advisors, but you need friends that
yeah.
deal with your personal issues. And we all have them. They might be a family member or they might be a friend. And we usually have one or two that we go to. And you need the same thing in business where you can pick up the phone and call somebody and say, "Hey, I'm really grappling with this. Have you experienced it?" Because you need like people to do that. And the
Yeah.
only way I was going to find that wasn't going to be in my neighborhood.
No.
Most of the women don't work, you know?
Right.
And so I end up talking about, kid things and shopping things and because they don't have a clue what a balance sheet is. And so you need to seek out and find those people. And it doesn't take but a few that
Yeah.
really surround you. And that, I mean, I could pick up the phone and call you, Gary, and ask you anything. And I
Yeah.
value that relationship that we have. And
Yeah.
that's on the business side. I probably would call you too if I had a personal, but it's usually on the business side.
Yeah.
But you begin to feel trust. You find a trusted person that you can do that with. I think that's hugely important for any level, C level, whatever you are. You've got to have people that you can talk to.
Yeah. And it does take the courage to just be able to drop your guard. So,
Yes.
you have to have both, and you have to have more wisdom than I've had at times because I've been way too trusting,
Oh,
way too soon for way
yes.
too many people, and I've got the battle scars to prove it.
Yeah.
But I would still rather err on the side of that than just being so guarded.
Yes.
But wisdom is needed.
Yes.
And so anybody that's like, we've got a nice little crew on here today, and a lot of very familiar names. Jamie, it was good to see you yesterday at the uh, Growth Symposium. I'm so glad that he was there. Um, any questions? Because man, this is free for all time. You've got an amazing resource with Tan on here, and this is a one of the few subjects that I've got deep, 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 deep passion about that I could go deep and long on. So if anybody has questions, I'll be watching the Q&A, and you can hit us up and harass us in the chat. I didn't see Papa Joe on here, so there's been no harassment in the chat, and it's always good. But anyway, Joe Farrell, he's been on here probably since the first day that we launched these things. So um, if you guys have any questions, hit us up. And again, do yourself a favor, go to Amazon and get Tana's book. And it's not because we make any money on these
No.
books. We really don't. Not much. But what an amazing story. Um, and I hope it inspires you. That's the bottom line. I hope it inspires you to have the freedom and to take the courageous step to find people outside the jar, to
Mm.
admit that you need some help, and any of the other things that we talk about actually in my book as well. Tana, any other thoughts that you have? You know, if you're talking to, because we've got a number of leaders, entrepreneurs that are on here that I know, any additional pieces of advice that now, as you like, you are still accelerating, which is what I just think is so amazing. You're just accelerating. You haven't backed off the gas and like, hey, let's just go hang out at Martha's Vineyard. And I know you like Martha's Vineyard, but like, you know, but I can't see you spending more than a couple weeks there,
No.
because like you got to get stuff done, you got to go get activating.
Yes. Yes.
So
I gotta be activating at all moments. I just think, I think something popped up, a
yeah,
suggestion getting mentor or join group. Um, I like both. If I were to say, everybody asks me who's my mentor. I don't know that I have a mentor. I have a group of people that I deal with, but I also like a one-on-one coach. And I
yeah,
go in and out of different people because different people give you different results. Um, they can be called a life coach, they can be called a business coach.
yeah,
I'm working with one now. I mean, because I'm at a new phase of my life and I'm trying to figure it all out. So it's great to have that. And then also joining the group of peers, finding that peer group is critical.
yeah. Randall, you've always brought out a lot of great questions, and I appreciate your vulnerability. You say, how do you find people outside the jar? I'm terrible about picking people out. Well, Tana, what's your advice?
Um, I think most of mine have been from the group that I joined, the Women Presidents Organization, the peer group. I think those are my business people. And then my personal is people that have been in my life since I was 18 years old, my best friend, and 20 years, my neighbor and friend that I travel with. And I think it's those trusted relationships. But the ones that are the most for business for me have all been through this Women Presidents Organization, except for you, Gary.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate it. I'm in good company. Um, Randall, what I would say, because if you I've struggled at times because I'm a member of a number of peer-to-peer groups as well. And some of them I've started myself because I had a very specific purpose and I was looking for specific kinds of individuals that had some commonality in those things. So when I came back to Charlotte, I had to be opening doors in Fortune 500 companies. And that's a different thing than running your own company. It's completely different. And so I needed some other folks that were calling on those same kind of people but I was very careful about curating because I'm not into like, hey, people are chess pieces, let's use them. Like, hey, I'll give you this, you give me that. I don't want that at all. I just wanted learning. So I was looking for mindset. And so I was very picky about who. But there are groups, whether it be there's a group called C12, and it's more of a faith-based kind of peer-to-peer group. Jeff Wolfberg has a really good group of um, smaller company CEOs and entrepreneurs, and I think he does an exceptional job. Um, BGW actually has with BGW Growth, which is Sandler Sales, they have a thing called organizational excellence, and I know Jamie's going through it. So that's actually for kind of CEO and number two, kind of those guys working together and going through with other peers that are also going through it. I think that's pretty powerful. Vistage is another great one where you have, but it comes down to what you have to understand, like what's your purpose in the group? What are you looking for? And then get very intentional about it because otherwise it's just, picking people off the street and that doesn't really work too well. Anything you would add to that, Tana?
Yeah, I wouldn't join something that's a networking group, like you said, where people are trying to get something out of you. You need a
Yeah.
peer group that you're learning, and usually those are small groups like Vistage, 40 Under 40, the Women Presidents Organization for women that own their own businesses. And I know there's a bunch more. And another
Yeah.
thing that I went through, which you mentioned, that C12 group, it was
Yeah.
halftime. I went through
Yeah.
halftime, which is Bob Buford, which is a Christian organization on what is your purpose.
Yeah.
And my two-word purpose statement out of that was igniting joy. And
Mm,
that's something that I was meant to do. And
yeah.
I think of that in everything I do. I think, am I igniting joy? And which is interesting. But that's the On Purpose. I don't know if you've read the On Purpose Person or the On Purpose Business Person books. Um, oh, I
Yeah.
can't think of the author's name right now, but he really inspired me to find the two-word purpose statement.
Yeah. Keep it simple,
Yeah,
you
keep
know,
it simple.
keep it simple. Something that actually means something. What drives me crazy is when I see organizations go through, half day exercise before they all go play golf or whatever, where they just mishmash a whole bunch of words and like, yeah, that sounds good. And it's like written by committee and it has zero soul
Right,
and none of them can remember it.
right,
That is like useless. It's completely useless.
right.
Yeah, Lloyd Reeb said, because I got to meet him, he's with Halftime, and he
Yes,
said, he goes, "Oh, you know Tana?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, she came through this." And so he's a big fan too. Well, I know that we're bumping up against the top of the hour. Gosh, Tana, I could talk with you forever, and we could just continue to have very stimulating conversations about stuff that matters, and about
yes,
how do we deliver value in the marketplace? How do we make our employee experience better? And how do we keep, our own heads straight and not being bogged down by the craziness of the world that continues to seems like it's spiraling out of control.
yes,
But somebody's got to have the wheel. Somebody's got to have a steady hand. So maybe it's going to have to be all of us,
yes,
hopefully. At least we can at
yes.
least do our little part. So, Tana, where can people find you if they want to follow you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn Tana Greene. There's not many Tanas, so it's pretty easy to find me. And Green has an E on the end. So I'm always posting a lot of things, especially about the business and what's
Yeah.
happening in the workforce and just aha moments. It's like, is your policies causing your turnover?
Oh,
So a lot of insightful little videos that we post up once or twice a week, um, just about, hey, looking at it a little bit differently. If you have an hourly workforce, you definitely want to tune into that. But that would be the place to follow most of my rants.
I love it. Tana, thank you so much for taking
Thank you,
time
Gary.
out of your day. Everybody, thank you for taking time out of your day. We will put this up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on. And next week, Lord willing, we'll have Adam back because he was at a graduation today. And Jack was at an F1 race with his son, who is also racing. So that's pretty cool. He's not racing in F1. He's just looking at the big boys and learning. So anyway, thank you guys for taking time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy this
Thanks.
beautiful weather. Thanks again, Tana. See you around.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.